Having become a dad in the last few months, it forces you to a reckoning of what really matters and who you want to be. And I just want to be Wit's dad.
And I want to honor our fathers too, as we're talking about Father's Day, the example that they set.
Somebody asked me the other day, what's the best part of being a father? And I told them watching my wife become a mother.
You can be the one to step up and make a difference in your family tree, in your family line, and to be present, to serve your wife when it's not easy.
It's times like this where you start to look back and realize, like, you didn't just become a father. Like, there are so many stones that had to be laid in order for you to become Dan's dad. Like, and if I had to do it over again, I don't think I'd change a single thing.
I have not only an entrepreneur, author, family man, father, but a great friend of mine before me today, Hamilton Winters. First off, man, just thank you for coming on the show.
Of course. If you call, I'm always going to answer. So
Come on the spot, Hamilton dropped what he was doing. We're on a family beach trip here, and Hamilton came on over, and I'm just so excited because a little bit of context, we were having this conversation in the same spot where we reconnected, and a little more context is our fathers both worked together, and I always knew of Hamilton, coming from afar. I grew up in a small town. He grew up in another small town. And it wasn't until, I guess it was about 2017 when I knew that Hamilton was coming on a beach trip. Our families have been coming here early summer in the panhandle of Florida every year. And Hamilton was coming, and we were staying pretty close to each other this year. And I decided to, you know what, let me hit him up. And I think the first time was by the pool. We were just catching up. Do you remember that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And it kind of planted the seed for what is now a great friendship. Even though the distance separates us, this trip has been a special place to come together, to break bread, to have impactful conversations, plant seeds, and really both of us before what we're doing now with our careers and families, before we even met our wives. This is this is where we are. And so let's go back a little bit to when we first connected. That's kind of where I want to start this conversation.
Yep.
And of course, we'll get into what you're doing, and both of us a new step that we're both stepping into, a new chapter. But going back to that first time when we connected, kind of what was going on, and we took a trip to the local airport, and just set the scene there, and kind of where were you, and what was kind of going on in your mind and your heart.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again, because this is not the first time, although the first time in this context. Seeing you develop over the last few years has been really a great privilege of mine and everybody else that's watching and listening. And so I don't know if you see it day to day, but we see it over time, and night and day, man. You were good then, and so you're unbelievable now. So just wanted to say that.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, I grew up probably 30 minutes from you guys.
Yeah.
My dad and your dad, both judges, were judge partners for a while, which is cool. And we would hear about you guys all the time. If you want to know who thinks most highly of your family, maybe of any of the 8 billion people in the world, I'm up there. My dad, though, he's y'all's PR person. And so we'd always hear about you guys, and we'd see each other here and there. But yeah, that beach trip, I think it was 2018.
Yeah.
And we met, I think, by the pool. Y'all had come down to where we were staying in Destin, and you took some great shots on the beach. I'm really glad it was that summer, because I was probably in better shape that summer than maybe I've ever been. And so, yeah, it was good to get those shots. And yeah, so what was going on in my life? I had moved to Atlanta within the last year of us. Actually, yeah, it was less than a year that I had been in Atlanta when we got to hang out. And I had just transitioned out of my first job post grad school. So I went to grad school at Ole Miss, moved from Oxford to Atlanta. Didn't really know anybody out there. Just had a job offer from a friend of
Yes.
now ours, Trevor Smith, who had hired me on to sell lighting, which is crazy. Yeah.
That's
So
right.
another,
Okay.
yep. So crazy story there. Won't get into it now just for sake of time, but had transitioned off of there because it was just a really tough gig. I told Trevor, I was like, you were the best part about that role, but it was a really tough role. I didn't have a territory, didn't have any training. It was just, hey, throw you to the wolves. And it was great experience. Found out very quickly that it's not something that I wanted to do long term. And so living in Buckhead at the time, which is around the city center of Atlanta, all the young people were living at the time. I would hear planes fly over, and growing up, I was obsessed with planes. You know, around that time, I don't know who it was. It could have been you, as insightful as you are, that asked me like, "Hey, you know, what, when were you your happiest, and what made you, that version of you the happiest?" And for me, I remembered being like a 3-year-old at the Monroe Airport. My parents would take me on Sunday afternoons to go watch the planes take off and land pre 9/11. Can't do that now. You just walk into the gate and watch these planes take off and land. And man, I turn into that 3-year-old every time I see a plane. And so hearing the planes fly over, knowing at the time, like, hey, this job is not really what I want to do, but I want to stick it out as long as I can, having a little bit of disposable income for the first time, I'm going to go learn to fly. You know, my childhood best friend, Cab Bradley, I don't know if you know Cab, he's a dentist in Monroe now, but he and I promised each other growing up that we were going to get our pilot's license together, and he had, and I did not. And I wanted to be a man of my word. And so I was like, you know what? Pull my leg. Let's go. So I found a flight school at PDK Airport, DeKalb Peachtree, and I started to learn how to fly the summer that we met. So
Yes, that's right.
I guess the spring. So I was approaching, this was in June, early June. I got my private license in July. So I was still training at the time. And it didn't take me long to realize, like, dang, this is a lot of fun. You know, Top Gun's my favorite movie. Like, all the signs were there. Like, and there was a pilot shortage. And so I was like, oh, I think I'm going to learn how to fly. I could get paid to travel. Like, I've been to 30 countries, and I could get paid. I don't have to pay to go to those countries anymore. Like, I could go and do this for a living. And so I ended up quitting that first job and starting to train full time. So we did that video, that original video, which I'm sure you'll link to. I mean, it's like Carpe.
That was the origin. That was, I mean, 2018, officially the LLC was created in was it 18? It was 17. It was 2017 is when it was created. But when I initially started Carpe Momentum, it would just be little, at first, photo snippets about people, what they're doing. And then it turned into video. And Hamilton was the first person I featured for the video. And I got wind by the pool that he was becoming a pilot. I'm like, man, this is incredible. You're talking about Top Gun and about your dream. And like, why don't we just go to the airport? And I guess you just reached out. I don't know what you did.
Yeah, I just called him and I was like, hey, I'm a student pilot at PDK. I would love to like come and film a video with my friend at the airport. Like, how would we be able to do that? And they were like, yeah, no problem at all. You can do that. And then they were like, do y'all want to go tour the tower while you're out here? Do you remember us doing that?
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, no, like, we would love to, but like, I don't want to impose. They're like, come on up. So we got red carpet service at Destin Executive over here. It was a lot of fun. I still can't believe they let us do that. They're like, oh yeah, park behind this Gulf Stream and film whatever you want.
Yeah,
right,
I got footage of Hamilton walking by the planes. We got to go in the tower. Yeah, just really, and even again, as we're having this conversation and knowing where you are now, which we'll get to, crazy full circle moment.
Crazy.
Which started here, but continue. Yeah, you were in that stage, and I was in the stage of really getting excited about what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And now to see us both where we are.
Yep.
But yeah, so what was that spark? You had just gotten your license, and kind of what was moving in your heart at that time?
Yeah. So I got my private license in July. So this would be weeks after we did that video. And I had begun my instrument training right after that. And it was either right before I finished my private license or right after I started my instrument training, that the manager of the flight school that I was attending came up to me. His name is Russell. And he was like, hey, can you meet me in my office? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I thought I had done something wrong. Like, what did I break? You know, the manager of the flight school calling you to his office is generally not a good thing. And I go up to him and it's like, hey, what's up? And he goes, you have a business degree, right? I was like, yeah. MBA? Yeah. He goes, cool. I'm an engineer, went to Georgia Tech, could have gone the engineering route, decided not to, wrote my thesis at Tech on, taking a more holistic approach to aviation. Aviation is seen as this like cutting edge technology industry, and it's really archaic in a lot of ways. But it's also very exclusive, and it presents itself as this like Gnostic, like, oh, we have the knowledge and you don't. So like, we're going to force you to go through these, steps, and we're going to treat you like children until you get to certain levels, and then we'll allow you to fly. It just becomes something that wasn't necessarily fun. It was inherently fun to fly, and specifically the guy that was running or that owned our flight school had taken a lot of the fun out of it. And he was like, "What would you be interested in helping me start what would ultimately become a competitor of the business that I was a student at, that he was the manager of?" But at the time, it was just going to be a ground school to be a value add to them. With this pilot shortage, there's going to be a lot of unqualified potential, prospects. And if they come to our ground school first, we were big on education, because you only go up with what you bring from the ground. You don't want to be up there not knowing what you should have learned in ground school. Flying's fun. It's like dessert, but don't go straight for dessert. Eat your meat and vegetables first, go to ground school. And then if we pass you off to the flight school, you are less risk to them. We were a weed out program.
That's great.
And so I was like, man, I don't really have any business like experience. I just have the degree. And he was like, it's okay. Like, I think you're the right guy. And I was like, all right. So I went home and I created a brand, which is now known as Inspire Aviation, NSPIRE. And we worked on it over the summer. I could kind of see his vision, but I couldn't see it as clearly as him. But he was like super motivated and super, just a guy worth following. And that summer, I was trying to figure out like, hey, is this like a viable career path for me? Like, it's kind of taken away from my training, which I'd already identified as like a much more viable career path. And if I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it to the commercial or cargo, level, I need to get hours. And if this is taking away from my hours, this is really a distraction. So parallel to me helping Russ create what's Inspire Aviation is, which is now a flight school, I started to apply for the Air Force Reserves. And I was going to ultimately, if I got into the Air Force Reserves, start flying with them and earn my hours going the military route. And so pretty crazy, because I really didn't know which one of these is going to work out. I was kind of hedging my bets a little bit. I went to Asia in August of 2018 on a 36-day back 18. That was my second Asia trip. So it was an 18-day Asia trip. I had pretty incredible experience over there. Came back and I had finished my application for the Air Force Reserves right before I left. So I was kind of like just giving it up. And when I got back, I was going to tell Russ, I was going to come clean. Hey, I've been applying for the Air Force Reserves. There's a good chance I'm going to get in, and you need to find somebody else. And when I got there, before I could even speak, he was like, I want to show you something. And he showed me around the building that we operate in now and have always operated in at PDK Airport. And it was all these new office spaces. And he's like, look what I got us. Like, I got us a space, and like, this is for us. And like, we're going to build this thing. And I was like, oh, like, you don't know. Like, it's, and I couldn't tell him at that point. But he was like, I've like rethought all of this. And like, he had a really cohesive plan about what we were going to do and, how we were going to raise money to be able to purchase an aircraft and become a flight school. And he was really telling me, hey, I'm meeting you halfway. Are you going to shake my hand? And I went home and I just felt awful. And then I got an email that same afternoon from the recruiter from the Air Force that said I had missed a signature, so my application never went through. Wow. And I sent him an email back after praying about it. And I was like, hey, well, why don't we put the application on hold? I think that there's something else I need to do first. And so I went and built Inspire Aviation into a flight school with Russell. And that was really the beginning of the end of my commercial aviation journey of like, I don't need to be in the pilot's seat. I need to be in the business guy's seat, creating a place for other people to fulfill their dreams. It's, for lack of a better, example, I was thinking about the Rookie. Have you ever seen the movie The Rookie?
I don't know if I've seen it.
uh, Dennis Quaid. He
Okay.
like gives up on his dreams to become a baseball player. He ends up being a teacher instead and coaching players to be able to fulfill their dreams,
Wow.
which was ultimately his dream. And then they convince him to go and pitch. And anyway, it's a really cool movie. But I need to take a seat back because I can either be in the cockpit and maybe it's what I want to do, maybe it's not. But I really need to create a place for other people to do that. And so we did that, and it's been crazy. But that was just the beginning, the origin of the experience. So
Come on. Well,
within months of us having that first episode, like I haven't thought about this in a while, but
it's
it's pretty
crazy.
crazy. Yeah,
Yeah, and I just want to affirm you too. I think that's God's timing of putting a hold on that application, because even just as you're talking about it, of course you could be in that pilot seat. Of course you
totally.
could do a great job. But there's a difference between, I was reading a book called Beyond Entrepreneurship,
Yep.
and I'm still extracting many lessons. I'm in a chapter about casting a vision. But before that, there is a concept he was talking about. It's actually in a podcast that I listened to before the book, but talking about that certain people you can be good at something. You can be skilled. I firmly believe, Hamilton, that anything you put your mind to, you could be good at it. You could be competent. You could be skilled. But certain people are encoded, are created for a certain gifting, for a certain path to step into. And I feel like, of course, I think you would be very skilled as a pilot. But the ability to cast a vision and propel, no pun intended, other pilots, other dreams, to create the branding, the messaging, the why behind why we're doing this, to garner the students, the people, to cast a vision. You have such a gift in that area. I just want to affirm you. And again, we'll step into a little bit, but each place that you've been able to help cast the vision, to help. Even with us working together, we'll get into a little bit with some video stuff of helping a script and how we piece this together. What is the messaging? How are people going to feel? And yeah, just want to affirm you, brother.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
It's been fun. Also, the pilot stuff, like it's one thing to on the backside of it be like, oh, this is cool, but it might not be something like I was good at it.
Yeah.
Like I broke the record.
Really?
In our flight school, I got my pilot's license in 42 hours, and the FAA minimum was 40. And like, you got everybody telling you like, hey, you're a really good pilot. Like you've got a long career ahead of you. And so it just made the decision a little bit harder than just like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. It's like, am I really giving up on something that I'm really good at? Like, this is maybe the first time someone had told me like, hey, you've got a real knack for like a skill, not just like, oh, you're a really good guy, or like, speaking or something. It's like, hey, you're a really good pilot. Like you have a long career ahead of you, and then to take a completely different trajectory, I think needs to be at least like put out there for anybody that might feel this tug on their heart, or like, hey, am I giving up on something that I'm going to regret in the future? And we'll go into that. But
and I think and before we move off of it, I think it's important to, even in the position that you are, again, that we'll get to, but having that knowledge of hands-on knowledge, I think makes you even more effective leader,
totally,
even more effective communicator, because you've had your hands on the wheels. You've seen the landings, the takeoffs, the patience, and the ability to complete a private license.
That was what Russ ultimately said was the reason why he knew that I had what it took to do what he wanted me to do, was because he saw how I was chasing after getting my license. And he was like, okay, if I can put that guy to work on something else, if he gives it that same amount of fortitude and, eagerness. And so it matters. It matters what the approach that you take to something else, because there might be an opportunity that's totally unrelated, that someone's watching how you do that thing. Yeah. And it ultimately is the reason why they ask you to do something totally different that sets you on a trajectory that God really wants you to be on.
And planting seeds too. Like, when we first met, going to the airport, getting the private license, inspired. Just you don't know until you look back, and especially what I keep saying we're about to get to, because you've been on a winding journey and path. But sometimes seeds, you don't see the growth until you look back 10 years later, like, oh my goodness, that was a pivotal point, which set me up to exactly where I am right now. Yep. And so as we look forward really quick, as we just share a little bit of your journey, what was kind of that next step you thought it was going to be Inspire, and what
Yep.
opportunity kind of opened up, or
Yep.
what did God place on your heart to move next?
Yeah. So we spent the next year and a half, 2019, 20 through 2020, I guess 2018 through 2019, really, um, building what Inspire is now. So a full-fledged flight school at PDK. We bought our first aircraft in 2019, and we had a lot of people that knew and liked and respected us that were at the school that we were all at because it was the best option available to those students. But we knew that where we went, if they knew we were going, they were probably going to follow us, and so a lot of them did. And it was really cool to see your flight instructor put on your brand. You know what I mean? Like, he worked somewhere else and now he's working at your company because he likes you as much as you like him, and now he flies for Delta. And it was a really cool thing, walking into work and not knowing what you're going to do that day. It just needs to be the most valuable thing for the company. So really good, important lessons. Didn't make a lot of money, but made a lot of really incredible relationships and learned a lot about myself and about business. And about, I guess, 2019 at some point, tying it back to Trevor.
Yeah.
So Trevor's got this new business idea that they have. He and a friend of his who went to Georgia Tech has created this process where they can make composite materials stronger, lighter, faster than anybody in history. It's pretty incredible. I remember him talking about this like when we worked together, and we have just become super close friends after we stopped working together. And he was to the point that he was like, "Hey, I want to like take this on and like help him make this a business and ultimately take this to where it needs to go." And Catherine, his wife, who was also just as close to me and still is, as Trevor is, she is a commercial insurance marketing executive. She does business with this marketing firm, brand strategy firm, and they do so much business with this firm that this firm was willing to give Trevor's new company a free brand strategy workshop, but they needed a place to have the meeting. And so she called me and she was like, "You guys have a conference room, right?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, can I sit in? Like, can you let us use the conference room? And then will you want to sit in? Because I know you're a marketing guy. Like, you could learn a lot. Just like sit in on these, strategy workshop." So I sit in, still working at Inspire, still doing all this stuff. The workshop was really cool. And I was taking notes. And after a couple of exercises, the guy that was running the workshop was like, "Hey, you kid in the corner, like, what do you think we should do for the tagline or whatever?" And I was like, "Oh, well, if it was my company, I'd do this." It's like, "Wow, let's go with that." And so like he kept asking me questions. And after a while, it was like, "Yeah, that's really good, actually." And so Catherine took me aside afterwards and she was like, "You should get lunch with him. I think he's going to hire you." Like, that was like, I didn't know you had that skill set. Like, I knew that was your classical training, but like, I've never really seen you in action. And so a couple of weeks later, he actually gave me a job offer, and I talked to Russell about it. I was like, "Hey, like, I love what we're doing, and we've built it to a place where really it's a little bit like 2 people full time is a little too much. Like, one person full time, it's too much for just one person. What if I went kind of part time with you and part time with them, and kind of like wound down here and wound up with them?" And he was like, "I think that's it." I was like, "I just need some experience elsewhere, like real experience outside that I can bring back here." And so I worked as a brand strategist for them for 2 years, 19 and 20. And then when COVID happened, we lost half of our clients. It was a really awesome role. I was doing mom and pops all the way up to Fortune 500s, traveling country, really good gig. And we lost all of our clients. I got put into a sales role to like gain back some clients. There's no strategy to do when you don't have any clients, Ended up getting some clients back, which was good. But I just realized like, this is like, well, I got offered the chief strategist role in fall of 2020. So the guy was like, "Hey, I want you to take my job so I can work on the business and not in it." And on paper, it was like the perfect job. But a couple of uncharacteristic things happened. And ultimately, I felt like God was telling me, like, this is not the opportunity for you. And I turned it down. Yeah. So I'll stop there for a second.
Yeah.
But that's to bring Trevor back in, Catherine back in, and then work on the marketing brand strategy piece, which plays into where we're going. That was where and how I got some real teeth cut experience on that kind of stuff with other brands. So
no, I think that's important too. Even just being able to put your skills to the test in a sense with marketing, if you learn that in school, to bring that, of course, with no training going into one business, but to see, you probably got exposure to a ton of businesses,
Totally.
see how they tick, how they work, how can you message, and again, another kind of, I call it quiver in the arrow that you're able to use no matter where you are. One question, side note off that is, I forgot, when did Alex come into the picture? What was this?
2019. So yeah.
So in this season? Okay.
Yep. I was already exited full time, at least from Inspire, and was working with this brand strategy firm, but was pretty, I'd say, recent. It had been less than a year.
Okay.
But I was Mr. Consultant at that time, slick back hair, wearing turtlenecks, doing podcasts, like.
No, I remember it.
Yeah, it was a little bit too much of a persona at that time, but I embraced it. You want to be the guy, and sometimes you got to play the guy in order to be the guy.
For sure.
But then you realize sometimes you don't necessarily want to be the guy you've become, and so that was what I struggled with in that season.
Yeah, had to take off the mask.
Yeah.
And so with Alex, did it become serious then, or was it y'all were just starting to do?
Yeah, no. And
then Alex's is now wife, but for reference.
We met in August of 2019, serving at church together.
Okay.
And I mean, it had become pretty serious pretty quickly. I just, for whatever reason, I knew she was different, and I had been on a journey myself, personally and spiritually, to become less like the man I had become over the last few years, chasing after my desires and really just letting the current take me. And I was now trying to swim the direction I felt like I needed to swim, which was in a lot of ways against the current that I had put myself in. And she was different. She was very stable. She was very just put together. And I could put on that armor, but inside I was not really that person. So in a lot of ways, she was a life raft to me in that season. But took her flying, which that's a funny story in and of itself. Basically, I took her flying, which is like the ultimate like power move on a date. Like, oh, I'll take you flying. Like, let's go watch the sunset.
Sure, have a movie.
And it's really cool, and you look really cool until you forget to untie one of the wings.
No.
Yeah, which is what I did, because I was like, I got this. I'm a pilot. Like, I know my checklists, and in a small plane, there's only one door. So in order to be in the left seat, which is the pilot in command, you have to crawl in first, and then your passenger crawls in second. So the door is on her side. Well, I start going, make my ground call, Mr. Smooth, and then we start going. I'm not turning the plane, but the plane is turning, which is when I realized, like, I'm going to have to shut down the plane, ask her to get out of the plane so that I can crawl over and untie the wing. So it was like the ultimate, like, pride comes before the fall moment. But she ended up marrying me anyway, but it's funny to look back and be like, I thought I was so cool, dude.
Yeah. So tell me this. This is like an interesting kind of scenario. I'm thinking of other people. Like you said, the world's telling you you're great at this. Hey, here's the top position.
Yep.
And your girlfriend at the time, influences there. Especially with, like, as a man, I feel like when you have a woman, that interest, or it's like, man, I want to provide for her, I want to be this and that. In people also reinforcing that this is something you should do, but why did you turn it down? And was it like an internal feeling? Was God telling you? Was it a moment to step back and say, like, is this who I am? Is this what I want? Kind of just take us through that, because I know that's, people might be offered promotions or this or that, or this sexy position from the world's point of view, but yeah, how did you decide to not take that?
Yeah, so timeline wise, started dating August of 2019. COVID hits in March of 2020.
Yep.
The first 3 weeks of COVID, we go and live with her parents in their basement. So like that was, you asked if things got serious quick. Like you're going to know if you're going to want to marry this person or never see them again.
Yeah.
You know, you got to look. I never thought I would stay 3 weeks at my in-laws house, much less 3 weeks straight at my girlfriend's parents' house. And then she turned around and traveled with me to Louisiana, and we spent 3 weeks with my parents
I didn't
straight.
remember that. Okay.
6 full weeks
God.
with each other's parents. And so ended up being great. So they met me as this guy that had a stable job and, you know, consultant and, you know, somebody that could provide for their daughter. In the fall of 2020 is when I was offered that promotion and turned it down. And so you can only imagine, like, as someone who's likely the future father and mother-in-law of this person that you thought was going to be able to provide for your daughter and, you know, on a trajectory has now turned down this kind of like dream 6-figure job offer, which, like, to do what? And ultimately the answer was to go back to grad school, to go to seminary and, like, study the Bible. You can only imagine that for 99% of people would be like, you're going to do what? Like, but Alex and her family was fully supportive of that. And so that requires a little context. So part of that spiritual personal journey I was going on was in 2018, around right before we, got together. I had fallen into this Friday morning men's Bible study of a bunch of guys that I had met through a mutual friend, and they were cool enough to drink a beer with, but they loved Jesus, and they didn't approach me as if they had all the answers, but they had really good questions and allowed me the space to be able to question things as well. And started showing up every Friday morning, and that was my community. And about 6 months into attending, the guy that led the group was like, "Hey, we really enjoy having you here. You got 2 options." I was like, "Okay." He's like, "You either need to lead a group or you need to go and, like, not come back." I was like, "Okay, I'm not prepared to lead a group." He was like, "Totally understand, but you're going to need to find somewhere else." And I was like, "But this is, like, my community. This is the highlight of my week. Like, you know, I'm reading the Bible as an adult for the first time, and this allows me the space to ask those questions. Like, I don't know where else I would go." He was like, "Cool, I'm splitting my table next week, and you're going to take half of it." And I was like, "Okay." So I took half of it, and one of those guys is Watts, who you know, just a really good group of guys that we were all just trying to figure it out, and at varying levels of lostness, but God was working in each and every one of us. And so over the course of 2018, 2019, and ultimately up to the moment that I was offered this dream job promotion, I just felt like the Lord was, like, really tugging at my heart. And these guys were asking such good questions, Daniel. Like, I'm telling you, like, that I would get stumped multiple times every Friday morning. I'm a guy that doesn't like not knowing the answer. Like, I like Google up now, Chat GPT up, just asking random questions. Like, I'm a vat of useless knowledge. I like to know the answers, and they were asking really good questions. And ultimately, after taking a trip to the Holy Land, which I 100% recommend that anybody do if they're able, and taking a class from Dallas Seminary called The Story of Scripture, where they taught all 66 books of the Bible and told one continuous story throughout about the name of Jesus and the person of Jesus. And I was like, oh my gosh, this makes sense for the first time. That was ultimately what I was battling against when making the decision of, do I take this dream job offer, which on paper makes a lot of sense, or do I do something that makes totally no sense? And I go back to grad school, which I'd already sworn off going back to school, and go and try to figure out these questions, not only for these guys, but ultimately for me. Like, I want to know if this is true. There is no greater investment of my time, effort, and energy than figuring out, is this God's word? And if it is, what does it say? And what does that mean for our lives? Because it is ultimately, if it is true, it is telling us about who God is and how we are to appropriately respond to the person of Jesus. And I don't know that I have the answers to that right now. And I can't expect anybody else to go. I also don't want to just get my information secondhand. So I'm going to go to seminary. And ultimately, that's what I ended up doing. So, but didn't make a lot of sense. At that point, I'm the light bulb selling pilot marketing guy, pastor. No, so
I love it.
Yeah, talk about an identity crisis, but
God.
yeah,
And
kind of crazy.
before we move off that, is again, just want to affirm the Friday morning. I don't know if you remember it, but one of those times going, I think I was a counselor at camp or I forgot what it was, but passing through Atlanta, stopped by. And I think it was, yeah, it was when you were dating Alex because we
Yep.
got to see Alex
Mhm.
and I went with you. And
Yep.
again, just want to affirm in these different pockets and areas, man, I've been able to kind of witness a little bit of you in your zone
Yep.
and just seeing you lead a group, a men's group, the ability to again cast a vision, not only like what is being said in scripture, but what is the bigger picture, what is the bigger story.
Yep.
And I know that's going to cue us up to another part of your profession of eventually writing a book, but I
Yeah.
think that was a little later after seminary. Yeah,
It
yeah.
was, and I'll also
We'll get to that.
sprinkle in a little bit of color there too, which is like so crazy
Okay.
that it was just a random Thursday night. My dad texted me, and it was your Uncle Philip's
Oh yeah.
number and address, and he was like, this is Danny's brother, Daniel's uncle, and he's got a son named Adam that's your age. Like you, if you ever see them, and they live in Atlanta. So the next morning, I go to Friday morning, and I'm sitting by a guy that I had not seen before, and he looks at me, he goes, "You know Daniel Ellender?" And I was like, "Yeah. Do you know Daniel Ellender?" And he was like, "I'm his cousin Adam." And I was like, "I have your number in my phone from last night." My dad
Boy.
legitimately texted me. It was a picture of a Post-it note of your uncle and your cousin's numbers and their address, telling me if I ever needed anything. And come to find out, your first cousin was already in that Friday morning men's Bible study and had seen the video of us from
From Destin? No
Destin,
way.
and that's how he recognized me and asked me if I knew you.
Dude,
And
that's
so, like, I'm telling you, there's just like
crazy.
so many, like, what are the odds? Like,
Dude, that's
yeah,
wild.
So thought you'd appreciate that.
No,
It's crazy.
no, I remember you mentioning that. But yeah, what are the chances the night
Yep.
before? And
He
I
doesn't
think
even live in Atlanta now. He's in
yeah, no,
Charleston.
he's in
So
Charleston.
like that was just the sliver of time that we both lived there. So yeah,
But again, it's part of, it's part of the story, God's story weaving us together. And I think it's just another beautiful touch point. But yeah, again, like I said, like I feel like it seems like each of these steps, there's been like training grounds.
Yep.
And it's cool to see that you explore because I think most people just kind of when they feel that like maybe they're being called to something, it's easy to kind of shove that down, not think about it. What if?
Yep.
And it's kind of maybe when they're 50, 60 years old, what if I had done that? What if I had gone for it? And I just want to affirm that you are a man. We're talking about carpe momentum, seizing the moment. You're taking action and you're not leaving it up to what ifs or chance, but you're exploring it and you are patient. I think that's the differentiator that some people want to have it figured out. And if it's like too much to even think about, I'm just going to stay put. But you are stepping forward in faith. And so again, just want to affirm you, brother.
Learning from the best. I mean,
Come on.
I've been watching you talk about somebody that seizes the moment.
I
I mean,
appreciate that. But so you step into seminary. So let's go back to the timeline.
Yep.
Because I think throughout your story, there's so many nuggets that we'll draw from, and it'll bring us to where we both are now in this new chapter. But I think this is important context, laying the groundwork for
Yep.
where you are now.
Yep.
And so you go into seminary.
Yeah, so I was looking into seminaries. I didn't really know that much about seminary. I just knew it was where the questions that I had were being asked, and the people that were the subject matter experts on those subjects were talking about these things. So I was like, okay, I'll go. Well, the church that I was going to at the time had a relationship with Dallas Seminary. And so I looked into going to Dallas Seminary, either online or whatever. And then somebody recommended, like, hey, there are these like residency programs where you could get part of seminary paid for and also like work part-time at a church. I really didn't have any interest in working at a church. But if I could not have a gap in my employment history, I really had never worked in the nonprofit religious space. And so I was like, okay, this could be cool. The church that I was attending at the time, their residency program, which is really mainly focused on post-college, like right out of college, people that want to be in career vocational ministry. I was not the target market. I'm mid-20s and have already had 5 years of a career. I'm just kind of doing this as like, hey, this makes maybe the most sense. There was another church in town, multi-campus church, and their residency program was accepting applications. So I sent in an application, guy that's running it, good friend of mine, reached out and was like, "Hey, thanks for your application. Like, you're way overqualified for this. I don't know that this is like the right thing for you." And I was like, "I don't know. I think it might be." And so interviewed, and they were like, "We've never had a student like you go through this program. Like, you are like 3, 4, 5 years older than most of our students. Like, you have real career experience. This really isn't like for people like you, but I think it could be cool for you to rub elbows with them and vice versa." And so I ended up joining this 2-year residency program where I worked at one of their churches and did seminary. So you do full-time seminary, part-time work, and they paid for half of seminary and invested in you. And so worked at a startup church, their newest church, and filled up ice chests and really did whatever was required of me. There were a lot of times where I was like, I struggled with the voice in my head being like, "You have a grad degree in business, like you've worked on Fortune 500 company, and you're filling up an ice chest for Vacation Bible School type stuff," like, and I had to war against that because that was not from the Lord. That was very much from Satan, just trying to attack the identity that I had built up of, you're the turtleneck wearing guy that knows it all, right? And you're filling up ice chests in summer for, a block party. Like, is this really what you're meant for? Like there was a lot of that.
Wow.
And then about a year into that, I was trying to figure out, because you're now halfway through the program, like, what do you want to do after this? I always wanted to go back to the marketplace. I thought this was a pit stop. I really just wanted the degree, but this was going to be able to tide me over to go back to the marketplace and somehow apply what I had learned to business. And long story short, paraphrasing here, they were like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "I want to go back to the marketplace." And they were like, "But if you didn't, like, what would you want to do?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't really want like a career in vocational ministry, but if I could like focus on a target market, like who my heart breaks for, it's people like me, young adults, 20 something, straight out of college that moved to the city, have few, if any, friends, trying to figure it out. I mean, it is such a pivotal stage of life. You have disposable income, you have like real autonomy in a lot of ways for the first time, and the world is just waiting to chew you up and spit you out. And it could also be, though, the most positively consequential years of your life, that if you lay a good groundwork, that will pay dividends for decades to come. And I had figured it out later than a lot of people. And I'm like, I'm looking for the people like me who are stubborn, who are looking for all the right things in all the wrong places. If I could do anything, would you allow me to put on events to go after those types of people? The people that are so lost that they don't know that they need to be found, and probably aren't interested in being found, but just need somebody to walk up to them and not invite them to church, but invite them to have a beer with you, and like be normal and like ask them questions that are about them and that are intriguing, and like don't just use it as a backdoor to evangelize them, but actually form a relationship with them, which ultimately, hopefully, leads to discipleship through the small spiritual deposits that you put in those people. That was what worked for me. So if I could do anything, I would do that. And they were like, "Why don't you do that?" I was like, "Okay, I will." And so for the next 2 years, I actually worked at a church in the city of Atlanta, very large church, and started their young adults ministry, which was crazy to me that they didn't have one. Like, they were our city church, like one of our biggest campuses. It was the church in Buckhead where all the 20 somethings were, and they didn't have a young adult ministry. And I'm like, if nothing else, like it needs to exist just because the market is so ripe for it. But like there were other young adults ministries. They would have a weekly worship night and that kind of stuff. Like that's for a church crowd. I'm not knocking it at all. But like we were coming from an organization that their mission was to create church environments for unchurched people. And like we need to go and create a young adults environment for people that would never attend one of our churches, in hopes that we would earn their trust, And so casting vision, I really worked on the branding and the strategy piece of it, because I needed to pitch to them this even needed to exist.
Right.
And when I came to them, I was like, "Hey, here's the data of why this is going to work. And here's what we do. We help 20 somethings experience the city, find their people, and grow their faith. And we do it by putting on these events in the community to help them connect, grow, and learn together. We're going to do a social event the first month, a service event the second month, and a scripture event the third month. And it creates this funnel to where they meet us. Hopefully we endear them and we earn their trust. And then we show them, hey, we're not just, normal people. We're normal people that care about people. and we go into a service event, and you don't have to believe what we believe to hang out with us or go serve your fellow man. But if you want to know, next month we're going to have a scripture event. We're going to dive into what God's word says about this. And now you're going to understand why we care so much about you and why we care so much about them. And it was just this, like, it was a really cool experience. We had like, I don't know, 700-800 people that had joined our group me by the end of the year and a half, 2 years, that after a survey, 73% of them had not attended a church in the last 5 years, many of them ever. And they just showed up and they were like, I don't know why I'm here, but I like you people and I want to keep hanging out with you. And I'm like, that's cool. We'll take you. But never thought I would do that. Never thought I'd be the guy that worked at the church and was a young adults pastor and answering 2 a.m. phone calls when people are having breakdowns. That was not my classical training, nor was that something I saw. The guy that had the video with you about planes would never have believed that was where he was going in the next, 3 or 4 years. And from the outside looking in, it made absolutely no sense. That was where I knew I needed to be at the time. So
that is wild. And this was paired with, by the time you finished the 2 years of the young adults ministry, had you finished the seminary program?
Yeah, so I finished the seminary program right at the beginning of the first year of the young adults ministry.
Okay.
So I graduated in 2023, and I did the young adults ministry from 23 through 24. So 23 and 24.
Wow. And what did that teach you, just as we're extracting the gold out of that kind of 2-year experience? I mean, I'm sure just being, quote unquote, as a shepherd figure of gathering people together, I'm sure you had to speak to the group or have those maybe more one-on-one relationships. What did you kind of extract from that season?
Yeah, I think when I went into it, I was like, okay, cool. Like, I know that my spiritual gifts are being able to teach and to be able to talk, and people's wirings, people's spiritual gifts, they lend themselves to certain areas of ministry. And mine, I always saw as being someone who could lend their gifts from the stage. How can we make this efficient? How can we have one person that speaks to tons of people? It's very evangelist model, very, and like, would I have enjoyed that? At one point in time, I was like, okay, I could, like, this might be something that I could do. I would speak to crowds. I mean, all the time I would get speaking engagements. It was fun. And I think through the experience, I realized that ministry, when done properly, can be efficient, but not at the expense of effective. Yeah. It needs to be effective. And your ministry to one person, one time, could be more effective than you speaking for an hour to 1,000 people. Was it efficient? Maybe that coffee wasn't the most efficient way to share the gospel, but it was the most effective way to share it, because you looked across at somebody and you spent an hour of your time making sure that person knew that they were cared about and loved and heard and seen. And I had to really slow myself down from the guy that thought that ministry was best done on the stage to the guy that realized that the 2 a.m. phone calls, they weren't my burden to bear. They were the greatest privilege of walking alongside this group of people. And it was what I never had envisioned myself signing up for. That was the role that I was playing. And yeah, it was bizarre. It was really bizarre. And waking up every day and being like, I never saw myself working at a church. Like, and people would introduce me like, oh yeah, this is the pastor at the church. And I'm like, whoa, like, man, like, and I had trouble like even identifying with that, like throughout the whole thing, because I had never really identified myself as that. Yeah. I wasn't the guy that woke up on Sunday mornings and on Wednesday nights just rip roaring ready to go to church. That wasn't me. Like, right. But here I am playing this role, and there was a lot of imposter syndrome there. There was a lot of, but it was all about the fruits. I'll mention this, that it's hard for people in ministry to track success because the metrics are so different. Is it by how much money you bring in? Like, no. Is it about how many people do X, Y, and Z? How many butts you have in seats? Like, how do you track success in vocational ministry? And I really didn't have a very good metric of the efficiency, or I had better metrics for the efficiency, not as many metrics for the effectiveness. And on my birthday last year, one of the guys in our group took me aside and showed me this like 8 or 9 minute long video of 10, 15 second messages from people in the ministry wishing me a happy birthday and telling me what an impact I had made on their life.
Mm.
I was like, this is the measure of effectiveness that I would have asked for. You know, you don't ask for somebody to make an 8-minute video of, but who gets this? You only hear these things at your funeral, and you're not even there for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So not to get emotional, but that was like, okay, I feel like I've run the right race here.
Dude.
I don't know that I need to keep running it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've at least run the miles that I was asked to run really well. There are regrets, sure. There are things I could have done better, sure. But like, man, when you look at the eyes of people and they know without a doubt that you care for them and they're closer in their relationship to the Lord after having met you than they were before, like, man.
It's eternal work, man.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So,
you know, there's a few resources that are really the one resource that you can't really recoup is time.
Yep.
And when we look back, like you said, on that deathbed, being able to see, I mean, I think for one thing, like you said, being able to see the fruit of the time sowed is a gift that you're able to witness even just some of that. And you probably won't, there's probably way more people that you may have impacted or this or that, but we won't know on this side of heaven. But time is something you can't get back. But looking back on your deathbed, work towards the kingdom, building the kingdom, like that is something you will never regret, you know, and that time spent with those people. And even when I think about just anyone in general, as wherever you are in your life, you know, sometimes it can seem inefficient.
yeah.
Having that conversation, checking in on that friend, calling your mother who you haven't seen in however long, your grandmother, if they're still alive.
Yep.
But it's those times with those relationships that ultimately those are the things we'll miss that we will want to get back. And so again, just want to affirm, and especially like I think in today's world, it's so like your time and you need this and you're the best in the world. You're this and that. Self-care. But how often is people telling to give of ourselves and because, you know, I'm even thinking about, and we'll get to this in a second, but with kids, you know, it's like often when I'm most angry or if something happens, it's like stripping away my time. You're taking away my time and that makes me angry and like get back in your place because I need my time. But it's amazing to see that you've stepped into the arena of giving of yourself, giving for someone else's time, and to see that there are eternal ripples that we may never see, and even you just to see a glimpse. It's all flipped, like you said. What he honors versus what we honor.
The upside down
economy.
I mean, my dad always used to say, when you look at the Gospels, Jesus' ministry was highly inefficient. Apart from the feeding of the 5,000, unbelievably efficient. Let me tell you, like unbelievable, dialed in. He did that multiple times. Like there are at least 2 accounts of that, and that's just what we know. At the end of the book of John, it says, you know, and essentially, if all of the things that he did were to be written down, there wouldn't be enough books in the world to contain them. Like who knows what we don't know? You know, we at least know that he fed 5,000, 4,000 people. Dad used to always say, he said, you know, we're always so busy. Jesus had the whole world to save, and he walked everywhere. What are you in a hurry for? And I think about that a lot. Like, man, I just don't see Jesus being rushed. Or efficiency being Jesus's like primary concern. Look at the story of Martha and Mary. You know, it's like it's actively against efficiency. It's Martha, you're so busy about cleaning your house and getting ready for me that you're wasting your time with me, you know, like Mary has chosen better, you know, like I have the whole world to save and I'm choosing to walk everywhere. My friend's dying. I'm not in a hurry. He's dead. It's unfortunate. I weep for him, but he brings Lazarus back to life. You know what I mean? Like time and time again, it is effectiveness over efficiency. And like how much of our lives, but really, especially in the church, is effective ministry championed over efficient ministry. Now, I'm working at a multi-site mega church, like the second largest church in America, and we're casting out the main pastor on screens that are seeing hundreds of thousands of people on a Sunday morning. I'm not knocking it, but like that model was chosen because it was efficient, right?
Yep.
And so like that is a battle that we all have to fight of like, if it can be efficient and effective, great. But if it's going to be one or the other, it better be effective, because people get lost in the mix when your goal is efficiency. You can efficiently minister the people out of ministry if you don't pay attention to that.
Yeah, and so often, just thinking about relationships, like, oh, I'll just do this because I'm with my person. It's efficient. This is something that we can both do.
Yep.
But again, am I checking in? Am I being effective with how is this relationship going?
You present.
Where are we at? Yeah, we present. Yeah.
You know, if I'm having a meeting with somebody and they're telling me they're opening up to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, dude, that's unfortunate. What were you saying about that? It's like, you don't care about me.
Yeah.
It's the greatest sign of respect you can show is doesn't
down,
matter.
Put it down.
Phone call comes in, silence it. Like, this is what matters.
Come on.
You know the kind of message that sends to the person across from you?
Yeah, man.
I'm far from,
especially in today's age.
Fail at it all the time. But
and I know we'll keep moving the story, but in today's age, just about, I think that the gift that you can give someone of just your presence, of being present
totally
in a distracted world,
totally,
it's more valuable now than ever. But I want to cover, we're almost there of the timeline, but I think in between that, I want to talk a little bit about your book. And first off, just want to recommend to check out Hamilton's book, The Art of Everything. And I think this is the perfect time to talk about it, about talking about weaving in God's story with our story. And, there's a lot of stories we could dive into with this, but the question I'm going to ask is, what was the inspiration for the book? Just give us a little synopsis, The Art of Everything, and then one story that you want to leave with the viewer that was impactful for you, or just like giving a little overview of it. So first off, what inspired you to write it? What is it? What is The Art of Everything? And what was an impactful story that you'd like to just kind of give a brief synopsis about?
Yeah, appreciate that. Since the book has come out, sometimes people will mention it to me. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I wrote a book. It's like, I'm not actively pushing it all the time.
Another feather the cap, man.
That's not necessarily why I wrote it.
You a cheat sheet for everybody after this of all the professions you've been.
Now I'm a light bulb selling pilot, marketing, pastor, author. Add one to the book. My sister made fun of me at my rehearsal dinner about that. But yeah, so the Friday morning group that I was a part of, the guy that started that had started some other like classes for people to take that would allow them to dive deeper. And one of the first classes that he offered was an Old Testament characters like leadership class. And so throughout the year, we would meet every 2 weeks and we would like discuss or like study the life of an Old Testament leader. We had to read a couple of books here and there. One was The On-Purpose Person, and the other was Radical. Kevin McCarthy is the On-Purpose Person, and David Platt is Radical. And we would have to then write a 1-page synopsis of that person's story, answering the question of, are they on purpose and are they radical and why? So we studied Abraham, we studied Jacob, we studied David and Daniel, and like all of these Old Testament characters. And by the end, the hope was that you would know what your personal ministry was. You would have gleaned a lot of leadership insights, good and bad, from these Old Testament characters. And you would realize that God is calling you to something, not so that you can be perfect at it, because none of these guys were perfect, but so that he can use you in a powerful way. Well, midway through the class, we took a pause on reading other people's stories, and we were tasked with writing our own. And I'd always wanted to like write my life story, but unless you have a reason to, like most of us aren't going to. A lot of us won't do it even if we are asked to do it, like I'm not knocking anybody that, like, I was just looking for a reason to. I had some cool stories to share. And so I took to it. And at the class where we turned it in, I turned in this fat stack of papers. And the guy that was leading the class was like, what is this? And I was like, it's my life story. He was like, there was a 2-page limit. And I was like, I never saw that email. I'd written like 23 pages front and back. Like I took to the computer and I was just like remembering things. It's an incredible experience to just like go back in your life and like recount some of these things. And now they're all on paper. And he ended up reading it, and it took him a while. And he came to me, he's like, you got to do something with this. This is really cool. You got some really cool stories in here that I didn't know about you. And I was like, oh, thanks. I kind of brushed it off. Well, a couple months later, this is in 2020. we had plenty of time on our hands, you
Yep.
know?
Yep.
And I woke up one night from a dream. And in the dream, I can't tell you the details. I don't really know the details of it, but the concept was it was taking these stories of these Old Testament characters and weaving them in with mine. And I woke up literally in the middle of the night and I went to my computer and I started reading some of the stories that I had written about the Old Testament characters earlier that year. And I started to realize how much overlap there was between certain circumstances of some of these Old Testament characters and my own life. And I was like, wow, like, what if I've already half written the book that I feel like I need to write? Like, what if it's just a merging of these two things? What if my stories, it took me writing about other people's stories and reading them? Because this is the first time I'm really studying these Old Testament characters. And the first time I'd ever written my own stories, I started to see there is a ton of overlap. I wonder if I put it together in a book, if it would do two things. One, show people that if they were to look back at their own stories and start to read scripture, that they can start to see scripture in their own lives and vice versa. But two, if they don't feel comfortable enough in their faith to share their own story yet, give somebody a copy of my book, right? And let me share my story through you to someone that might open up a conversation for you to be able to share your own story with them. And so it was 12 stories from my life over I think it was a 12-year period of time, going back from when I got stranded at Barack Obama's inauguration as a 13-year-old,
What?
all the way to Alex and me getting stranded at Lake Powell in Utah in a camper van, and just like people that I've met along the way, international journeys. The first half of every chapter is a story, totally ordinary circumstances, but somehow God turned it into an extraordinary circumstance, typically through people. And then the second half is the biblical parallel, a story from scripture, very synopsized, paraphrased version of the story. And it gives you a good understanding, like high level overview of my 12 years, my life, who I am a little bit, and then of the story of scripture throughout the Old and New Testament. And there's questions at the end of each chapter to allow the reader to start to actively engage with these stories in scripture and start to see their stories connect to his story, which is why it's called the art of everything. So the chapters are the art of ordering rice, the art of, something totally normal. You ask for a story, probably Baldre McDowell, who was a World War II veteran who you and
Yes.
I had the privilege of interviewing. He's now passed. So glad that we did that interview with him. It was a man that we would see year after year at Mardi Gras, and he would just elderly gentleman that was sitting on the roots of a live oak tree where we were set up. Our family sets up every year. One year, I think it was 2014, 2015, we decided to walk over and introduce ourselves. And he told us that he was a Japanese code breaker in World War II. And we formed just this incredible bond with him. And he ended up being like an adopted grandfather for us and ended up going to an assisted living home, and that's where he ended up living out his days. But we made spiritual deposits in him and he and us, but he was not, we never really talked about faith that much. It was just how can we love this person who he never married, never had kids. He didn't have we were as close to grandkids as he had. And ultimately I ended up getting to share my book with him, of which he was a chapter in the story. So he got to read what I had written about him and the impact that he had made on my life. But then when we went down and interviewed him, I ended up for the first time in our relationship talking to him and opening the door about faith. And this would be within a year of his death, talking about faith for the first time and asking him things about, what's your relationship with God like? Do you have one? And him questioning, I don't know where we go when we die, and like really reaching out and seeking. And ultimately throughout the next few months, my parents went down and he ended up giving his life to Christ at the 11th hour. I mean, the guy was in his 90s, World War II veteran, but it's the story of Zacchaeus of, he took a different seat. We were all there for the parade, right? But he, like Zacchaeus, he went to the tree to be able to see what other people couldn't see. And that was ultimately why he ended up being, introduced to Jesus. Zacchaeus, I'm going to dine at your house today. Everybody else was there. Why Zacchaeus? Because he cared enough to climb the tree. So the most unlikely character, Zacchaeus, the tax collector, you know, the guy that he paid his dues, but he lived a hard life. But pretty neat. So thanks for asking me to recount that. I hadn't thought about that in a while. So
Yeah, man. No, again, like I highly encourage everyone to read, to look out for the book. We can link it in the description, but to check out not only Hamilton's story, but how it interweaves with his story, with God's story, and how you can see your own story and his story in that. Again, just beautiful bridge. I think your ability to kind of bridge the gap between people, or if someone's just curious about, what is, why am I here, and where am I going, and what am I created for? I think you have a beautiful way of communicating your story and his story, and to be able to see how that's lived out. So check out his book, The Art of Everything. And as we wrap up kind of the timeline of your journey, and I want to talk about, as we finish this conversation about the chapter that we're stepping into in fatherhood, as this comes out on Father's Day, before we get to just some raw thoughts about where we both are at, this last part of the journey, and I think it's maybe the consulting Atomic Six to where you are now. Just give us a little brief synopsis of kind of from the book, seminary to where we are now.
Yeah. So last summer was my second year in the established ministry environment. This was my fourth year at the church. Was done with seminary, and like I said, that was not something that I had ever seen myself doing long term. And I had enjoyed a lot about it. Had opportunities to continue there as long as I wanted to. Talked a lot with Alex and prayed about it, and was open to the idea of something else. Not necessarily having to, but was open to it. And around that same time, Russell, my business partner from Inspire, which I'm still involved in, but just kind of passively, had invited me back, just asked me, hey, do you have any spare time with your ministry stuff to help me? Because I got a lot going on, a lot of opportunities since you left. We've taken over the fuel. We've taken over parking at our building. I've taken over the building and managing it. We've been asked to become a partner in the building itself. We've just got a lot of opportunities that I'm really excited about. But business-wise, I'm not a business person. And kind of like what he asked me to do from the very beginning, this is not my forte. I know how to put things together. I know how to make them work as an engineer, but I don't know how to make them work in a business sense. Can you kind of consult and help me figure this out? And I was like, I should have time for that. This was on top of my ministry work. It wasn't like a full 40 hours a week necessarily. Again, effective, not always efficient. And then Trevor, our friend, we had started talking about, hey, I'm looking to raise a lot of money. We've kind of skipped over from the brand strategy stuff. He did start a company called Atomic Six. They were originally going to be a consulting company. Then they decided, you know what, we're going to make this our own manufacturing kind of R&D type thing. And just kind of followed the journey of hey, what problems could we solve with these super high performance composites? And ultimately that led them to the aerospace industry. In 2021, he was like, hey, you're my best friend. I would love if you and your family would be invested in our company if you have any interest in that. And we didn't have a ton to give, but I had saved up some money that I didn't use on college, going to ULM for undergrad and Ole Miss for grad school, getting scholarships, and DTS, getting that half paid for. That I was like, I would love to do this. So we were actually the first investors of Atomic Six, the very first money in, and watching its success has been unbelievable. They now build satellite solar arrays and space armor, and you have come in and done all of our videos, which is really cool to have him look at me. And this is just as a friend, hey, we need a video done. Who can do it? And I was like, let me call a guy. And I called you and I was like, could you be in Atlanta next week? And you were like, yeah, probably. And he was like, I don't know this guy. We're going to set him up at a hotel. I was like, could he stay here? It'll help us keep the price down. So totally went out on a limb and trusted me that you were a totally normal guy, which I was like, he's one of the best guys, maybe the best guy I know. And then after not only your work and us seeing the quality of your video and it being even better than they had expected, Trevor's like, and Catherine, that Daniel guy is welcome back anytime. He is the most respectful, just the greatest guy ever. And you've done, I think, 2 videos. We're going to do a third. but the timeline got messed up there. So anyway, he and I started talking, and because of my brand strategy experience, he was like, we're trying to raise a lot of money. Our brand's not where we need it to be. Would you want to come and help us with that? And so I'm like, between Russell and him saying, hey, I need your help part time, and Trevor being like, not full time, but part time, could you come consult? I took that as like, hey, this is my exit plan. Also, I had someone who I'd had my eye on was not at our location, but another location, who had recently come and filled a vacancy at our location at Buckhead Church. And I asked her, I was like, if I was to transition off, is this something that you would be interested in? And she was interested in it. And I was like, all of the boxes were checked of like, replace yourself, go do something you're really good at, go work with friends. And so since Labor Day of last year, I've been consulting with these two friends of mine. It's been an incredible experience with Atomic Six. We're to the Series A round now. They're actively raising capital, which is so cool because I've never really experienced that. And I mean, we refreshed their entire brand. I mean, new website, new everything, which is not my forte, but another quill in the quiver, arrow in the quiver. And at the end of that contract, it got extended a couple of months past when it was originally supposed to be extended. I just started praying about like, hey, is this something that I want to do full time? Is this something that I want to do, at all? Is this, what do I want to do? And Russell reached out to me and was like, hey, again, we've got some really great opportunities. I had helped him to bring a bunch of these individual entities. Fuel was separate from parking, was separate from the management of the aircraft, was separate from the management of the building. It was just a hodgepodge of stuff. And I was like, okay, like let's separate the flight school and then everything else can be under a new brand. And we created a new brand, which is called Origin Aviation, which we just launched the website today. Actually, it's origin-aviation.com.
Check it out, everybody.
Yeah. So we will offer and already do offer these FBO, fixed base operator services to general aviation aircraft, but also have a private aviation side. So if anybody knows anybody that's looking to fly private, we can get you there. Just let us know when and where you're going. We'll get you there.
Come on.
But I decided, you know what? I think I need to go back into aviation. My heart just longs to be around the jet fuel. And I mean, like, go watch that video, that first episode. It's like, man, that's the happiest that I am, is when I get to go and listen to the jets take off. Like, seriously, I'm out at the beach just like looking at the F-35s and F-22s and tracking flights on my phone and stuff. But also like the ability to go work with Russ again. We have a really special friendship. And I have a special friendship with Trevor too. His trajectory is different than mine. And we're going to get to that. This is the end of the story here.
Yep.
Or not the end, but present moment, that having become a dad in the last few months, it forces you to a reckoning of what really matters and who you want to be. And I hear that airplane right there? I bet you that's an F-35. And I just want to be Whit's dad. And if you would have asked me beforehand, I would probably have told you over the last 7-8 years, whether I'd say it out loud or not, that there was this inherent belief that if you could do something, that you should, and if you don't, then like you're letting yourself and other people down. If you can be the highest level of the largest organization, just crushing it in your career, like that's your destiny. Go after it. And I think that comes from a lot of pride in me and being wired as a Enneagram 3 achiever of like just achieve. Eagle Scout at 14, pilot's license at 42 hours, undergrad in 3 years, like highest, bestest, fastest. Like there's credence to that. There's like, it's not bad to achieve. This is the first time in my life that I don't necessarily want those things. That like, and I struggle with that because like, part of me is like, oh man, like you've given up, you've changed, you're not that ambitious like driver anymore. And I'm not saying that I'm not, like, it's just different. Like I'm just at a point now that I know what I'm willing to and not willing to sacrifice. And I know that ultimately there are only 7 words that really matter. Well done, my good and faithful servant. And very few, if any, of that, very little, if any of that, is going to be tied to my career. It just won't. But I've met a lot of people. One in particular that, in working with Trevor, he was like, "Oh, you had a kid?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, I have three," and he immediately goes, "I missed about 10 years with him." And I asked him how old his kids were, and they're not much older than 10. And I'm like, "You said it like it was a regret, yet you continue to do it." So I don't know that you can have it both ways, like, actually, I thought I was gonna be here all night to like film this. I'm gonna pack up and leave because I got to make it home in time for bed, like to put Wit to bed, because like you just reminded me of what really matters. And I'm sure these people will be vastly and wildly successful from all worldly measures, but they don't make it back for bedtime. It's like, dang, is
Sheesh.
that really what matters? Is it really what matters?
Mm.
I'm not knocking you, I'm not. I had a really good example of what that looked like. Maybe they didn't, but like, what a privilege to have somebody to put to bed, like, man, I don't ever want to be in that position where I look at anybody and say, I missed a single day, much less 10 years, bro. 10 years. So, man, I didn't expect that to give me so much, but yeah, that's where I'm at. So my contract officially ended with Atomic 6 this past Friday. So literally the day before the beach. We're here. You didn't know that. And my full-time position with Origin Aviation as, the executive there taking it forward will start on Monday. And I'll get to work with some more of my best friends and do as much as we need to do to be the husbands and fathers that we want to be, instead of be as much of the husbands and fathers we need to be able to work more and make our company successful. And so it's just changed my outlook of like, could we do it? Yeah, we could franchise this thing. We could take it to new heights, but it's the Jurassic Park principle of like, could we bring dinosaurs back? Yeah, we could. But no one cared enough to ask whether or not we should. And you end up in a park full of dinosaurs. And yeah, sure, it's a great movie series, but I don't want to end up at Jurassic Park. Like I'd much rather end up at the beach down there with my kid than Jurassic Park getting chased by dinosaurs that we brought back because we could, but we didn't ask whether or not we should. I want to ask whether we should do things. And I think we'll get a better answer that way. So, but yeah, that's where we're at now.
Dude, come on, man. Gosh. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful journey. And first off, thanks for sharing. I think each step of the journey, not just for you, but for all of us, is very important. And I feel like, God's preparing us to be able to be the father that we need to be, to learn the lessons, the skills, the ability to have perspective. Because I feel like you've been able to see a lot of different pockets, a lot of different areas, and it's crazy just to think, even just our conversation of from where it started to where you are now, and both of us too. I feel like even though I was on a more, I guess there wasn't too much deviation from my path career wise, but I feel like we've been semi lockstep and, graduating, finding the love of our lives, now both having a child.
It's been months of each other on like almost every single one of those things.
Yeah, crazy. And it's been a joy to be able to witness you in each of those stages. And I think that's the beauty of like a friendship, relationship, to be able to root each other on, no matter where we're at, no matter what heights or lows, to be there for each other. But I want to dig into kind of this piece of fatherhood, and of course, again, I want to shout out your new company, Inspire Aviation, or
Inspire is the one we have still, the flight school.
Got it.
Origin Aviation.
Origin Aviation. Okay, perfect. And then before we move off of that, it's just a consolidation, like you said, everything but the flight school.
Yeah, so everything that we do aside from the flight school, so fuel, parking, aircraft management, and then now private charter. So for people that are outgrowing, people like Trevor or someone who's on the road a lot, raising large fundraising, or families that are seeking elevated travel, that kind of stuff. You don't necessarily want to get like a private flying membership to Wheels Up or competitors that have a fleet they have to keep running, and if you don't get in time, you can't fly. Use it or lose it. We can call all of those and say, hey, if you have a plane available, we have a client that needs to get from point A to point B. It's full white glove service of tell us when and where. We'll go shop it out and we'll get you the right plane and get you anywhere. So you don't have to buy a membership. You don't have to. There's no blackout dates. We're gonna find you a plane.
Yeah.
And you're not forced to go through TSA or any of that stuff. So a lot of people that haven't considered flying private before that. We're trying to tap into and give them a new experience of flying. So
Love that.
yeah.
Love that. Check it out. If you're in Atlanta, if you're in that area, check out their
Yeah.
Origin Aviation.
Fly through.
And as we wrap this up, talking about fatherhood, just want to give us the space first to both be able to kind of reflect on, first off, how's it been? And you talked about just how things are changing, just inside internally as you look forward. What has that been like? First, how is that? Having your first child, and how many months we're in. Just give a little bit. This is kind of more just off the cuff. Just kind of how's it been, and just give us both the space to talk about it. So
Yeah.
you can kick us off.
It's been amazing. Whit turns 5 months. He's 4 months and some change now. He's awesome, far better than we deserve. Somebody asked me the other day, what's the best part of being a father? And I told them, I thought about it for a second because there's a lot of really great parts about it. But I said, watching my wife become a mother is probably the best. I know you resonate with that. Just, it's a totally different thing when you see, it's almost like best way I can describe it is a butterfly. Like you see a caterpillar and they're a really beautiful caterpillar and they do their thing. And then all of a sudden there's this cocoon experience of, I don't know why I'm going to crawl into this hole for a little while, but I'm probably not going to be the same on the other side of it. And I'm sure that's scary for the caterpillar, like you don't know anything other than being a caterpillar, but this isn't your final form. And then to go into the cocoon and then come out as this beautiful butterfly that really a caterpillar is always a butterfly. They just haven't developed into their final form yet. But if they don't go through this cocoon experience, they can't come out as that beautiful butterfly that they were always meant to be. And it's still the same animal. There's just this process that happens. There's this change that happens that at the end, it's like, wow, that was in you the whole time. My goodness.
Yeah.
So again, I loved her when she was a caterpillar, but this is a totally different experience. Tough. Our pregnancy experience was not as difficult as some. Our delivery experience was very traumatic. And it all ended up working out, but it was wild. It was rough. It took a toll on us. Happy to go into that if you care to.
Yeah.
But it was
just give it a little snippet.
Yeah. So the day before Whit's due date, this is January 14th. No, it was the morning of the 15th. So his due date was the 15th, January 15th. It's a Wednesday. Wednesday morning, Alex wakes up at like 2, 3 a.m. with contractions. Excuse me. She had Braxton Hicks contractions, but nothing painful. These were painful. And she woke me up after about an hour of it. And she's like, hey, I'm starting to hurt a little bit. So I was like, okay, let's keep an eye on that. Throughout the morning, kept feeling them, started tracking them on the phone tracker. And mid-morning, it was telling us like, hey, these are 5 minutes apart, lasting at least a minute. You need to get ready to go to the hospital. So we call her OBGYN. Hey, give it another couple hours. Just keep tracking it. If it's still happening by noon, you can go ahead and head to the hospital. It was. Go ahead and head into the hospital around 1 p.m. We get to the hospital, get checked in about 1:30. By 2, we are in a delivery room. She's hooked up all sorts of, monitors and stuff. We're in early labor. They check her. She's not very dilated, but no big deal. Still having regular contractions. We're just going to watch you for a couple hours. 2 to 4, they watch us, come back in at 4. They're like, okay, she's dilated, not that much more, but more her cervix is starting to thin. So you are in early stages of labor. We're going to watch you for another 2 hours. So now it's from 4 to 6. So at 6, they come in. They're like, yeah, she's not very dilated still. You're fully effaced, but you're not where we want you to be. So you got a couple options. One, we can send you home and then you can come back. Or two, we can watch you for a little bit longer. And she was like, I'm not going home. It's 7 p.m., we're just going to stay. The last thing we want to do is get home and then have to recheck back in and everything. So they're like, okay, we're going to give you this medicine that's going to help you to like thin your cervix a little bit. It's not the whatever the main whatever you
Not
call it.
Pitocin.
Yeah, it's not pitocin. It's
Yeah.
called side attack or something like
Yeah.
that. Should be able to get you to rest tonight. So I texted both of our sets of parents, and said, hey, we're gonna, she took this medicine. We're gonna try to rest. They said, we'll wake up in the morning and try to, get after it again. I lay out my bedding, and I go brush my teeth. It doesn't take you long to brush your teeth. Literally, by the time I got done brushing my teeth, I came back into the room, and it was like the world was turned upside down. We had 10, 12 doctors and nurses in there flipping her on all different sides, calling, I need Dr. So-and-so to Charlie 3, tell him to hurry, using all this medical jargon that I don't know what they're saying. It was like walking into a nightmare. And I'm just standing there because all I did was go brush my teeth, and this is what I walk into. Obviously, Alex is like super uncomfortable. She's like, they're moving her all different directions. I'm watching the monitors, and I had figured out what the numbers meant. And I noticed that Whit's heart rate was like way down, like in the 60s. And it was at the 160s, 170s. And these doctors are like still flipping her over. So about probably 4 or 5 minutes into this, I just go walk over to you're helpless. I just walked over to my bedding, and I just sat down with my hands open wide. I just started like praying. And I was like, God, I don't even remember what I said, but it was probably something along the lines of like, God, I can't do anything here. We need you to step into this, And finally, after another 2 minutes of that, so now we're like 6, 7 minutes in, I like get up, and I decided to like walk and like try to inch my way into like touching Alex and like laying a hand on her. And I started praying out loud. And I was like, Jesus, we need you. And it was like at that moment, his heart rate came back up. And everything started to calm back down. And like, I'm not one to just like naturally jump into praying out loud. Some of the imposter syndrome, if pastor doesn't like to pray out loud, it's just not, it's not typically me. That was one instance that I can point to and be like, we got an answered prayer immediately. And none of the doctors or nurses ever said a word about it, but they all heard it. And regardless of what the result was there, they heard it. And it was invoking the name, like, worked. So after that, most of the people left, and they were like, so what that was called a prolonged deceleration. So when you have contractions, it kind of forces your baby underwater, so to speak. Their heart rate drops. They can't get the same oxygen they usually get. So it usually doesn't last that long. He had a 10-minute one, which is really long. We don't like that. Not unheard of, but definitely uncommon. We're going to keep a close eye on. You shouldn't happen again. Well, an hour later, it happens again for 7 minutes. And at that time, when it happened again, they dressed both of us for an emergency C-section. They're like, we got to get this baby out. Like, she's still not very dilated. Like, so something's going on. This is not good. And after 7 minutes, they're about to roll us to the emergency C-section room, and his heart rate comes back up. And they're like, yeah, we can't do too many more of these. It's like really not good for the baby. And so they were like, we're going to keep a close eye on you, but we do highly recommend that you do a C-section, because we were trying to do like a normal birth. And so we signed the paperwork, like, just get him out. We just want him here safely. And so scheduled this for 11. Well, it happens like 2 or 3 more times within the next hour, waiting for us to be able to go in there. And I just remember holding Alex's hand, and she was facing me, and she's shaking because her body's just like spent, and she's so worried. And I'm watching the heart rate monitor, and she's like, what's his heart rate? And she just kept asking me, and I was like, it's 160. It's, it's 150. It's 160. It's looking good. And then all of a sudden it would just start 140, 130, 120, 110, 100, 90, 80, 70. And then everybody would rush back in. It would all happen over again. And I'm like, I can't do this too much more. It just never ends. And so finally they were like, we're bumping somebody back. Your guys are next to go in. So go into the C-section room. There's like a 15-minute waiting period where you're just sitting outside. You're dressed in all of your stuff as the dad, but they're preparing her. And you're like, longest 15 minutes of your life, because now she's not on the monitor right now. Who knows what he's experiencing in there. If he's got a heart rate high, low, whatever. They call me in, do the C-section. It takes about 10 minutes. And we got a nurse anesthetist sitting back there with us, and she's like giving color commentary. And she's like, all right, the baby's out. We had been told, like, hey, you want to hear a really loud, like, cry? And we didn't hear anything. And about a minute later, they call in for the like hands team to start doing chest compressions. And we hear 10, 9, 8, 7, and they're doing chest compressions on our child because he's not breathing. And you're just like, oh my gosh, like, wait, it's never going to end. I'm like, she's asking me behind the curtain, like, is he going to be okay? And I'm like, he's going to be just fine. They do this all the time or whatever. And then they call for the second team because he's still not breathing. And I I started saying out loud, like, come on, Whit, like, cry for us, buddy. Like, we want to hear your voice. Like, please cry. Give us a really loud cry. And then finally he does cry. And it was like the like greatest like sound I'd ever heard. And I looked at Alex and I was like, I will never, ever, ever complain about hearing him cry. That's all I wanted to hear.
What a perspective.
That's all I wanted to hear. And they bring him over to us and they're like, because he had such a traumatic first few moments of life, we're going to have to take him to the NICU. Dad, you can follow me. We didn't get him back until like, I don't know, 10 hours later or whatever. But just being away from your baby, not getting to hold him. Like, we've had breastfeeding struggles and everything's worked out beautifully since then. But the first few weeks and month after that, just because of how traumatic it was. And we told our parents, we were like, you thought we were going to bed. By the way, you're a grandparent. It's like 2 a.m. We didn't get a room till like 4:30 that morning. Like, it was a full 24 hours. He was born 4 minutes before, I guess 4 minutes left in his due date. So like right on time. And we're like, we'll tell you the story later, but right now we just got to like, it was incredibly traumatic. But
oh my gosh, brother.
Yeah,
that is crazy.
Yeah, it was nuts.
That is crazy.
It was nuts, but very healthy baby now.
Yeah, praise God. I mean, that line you said at the end, like, I will never regret or get mad at a baby cry again because of hearing what a flip to that. And, you know, I think oftentimes the things that we want, desire, pray for, you know, God answers, he's faithful. And then years down the road, we're complaining about the thing we were desiring.
Yeah.
You know,
I've heard it said that many, if not most of our frustrations are a result of answered prayers. And you start to realize, like, wow, I'm the church example. Man, I really wish we didn't have to deal with all this parking situation. We don't have enough spots. That's a frustration because you prayed for God to send people.
Yeah.
You know, like, I really wish my baby wasn't up crying. You prayed that God would give you a healthy baby, and healthy babies cry.
Yeah, man. God. It's like, how often in my life am I complaining about things? And just to be able to take a step back, I think that's why it's so key to have time with prayer, time of quiet reflection in this distracted world, because we get so caught in the weeds of like, you just get frustrated. And man, like, how many people are praying to have a child, you know?
Oh, totally.
And to hear, every time you hear that cry, it's like, wow, what a gift, you know, in the midst of that. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing that, man. And it's been really cool to see even you step into it. I just want to comment on the fact of the greatest joy, seeing your wife become a mother.
Yeah.
And just to share a little bit with Colleen, my wife, just a superstar. And, you know, praise God, we didn't have as traumatic an experience as y'all, but being able to see her, we did natural birth, and to see her go through that process, it was wild. Yeah. And man, you know, you think, like you said, you think you see all of your wife, that caterpillar, but then, man, when you see them go through something so painful, so hard, to come out so resilient, so strong, and to now be like spending all of their time, you know, keeping this baby alive through nursing and the time and sacrifice. Just what a beautiful butterfly, and how I'm so grateful for my wife and just how hard she works, and just being able to endure that pain, and just what a beautiful gift of life of, like you said, going into the cocoon. Often it's those times of sacrifice, that time of even like, you know, seemingly death, in pain and suffering, that new life is born. And it's been cool to see that visual, the most visceral example. I mean, we see that with working out or with whatever, going through setbacks, and you come out stronger, but seeing the person you love most go through, it's such a mind bender, seeing the person you love most going through so much pain. You want to be able to help, and you're just there. Like you said, you're holding the hand, and it's like I want to feel that. I want to take that on.
Yeah.
But she is doing
can't.
that. And how often do we get mad about our wives for little things, or frustrated, and to see her be able to endure that, to sacrifice herself for the life of another is just beyond inspiring. And so shout out to our wives, man.
Totally. I also thought about this, like, the term born again is a very religious term, often stigmatized. Oh, he's a born again believer. I thought a lot about, I'd never seen birth before. Birth is incredibly painful. Yeah. Birth requires suffering.
Intense suffering.
Intense suffering. And so when you say, oh, I'm a born again believer, like, you might not have felt that suffering, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Like, she felt the suffering for Whit to be born for the first time. Christ felt the suffering for us to be born again the second time. You know what I mean? Like, and the visceral of, like, born again, like, what an incredible picture of suffering in order for new life to be brought about. I had no appreciation for the spiritual term that we use, pretty flippantly.
Yes.
Of like, but do you understand the birth pains that are required in order to bring about new life? Is it something that you've actively ponder and think about? And we will never know that pain. Our wives know that pain, but that's probably why they're, women are typically stronger in their faith than men are, is because they know what is required to bring about new life. We don't have a true appreciation for that. And so, like, seeing that, I was
connection.
Okay, this raises the stakes a little bit. So, thought that was a
I love that, being able to connect the physical to the spiritual, to give that perspective. One question I want to ask about fatherhood is, seeing our wives go through that, and they are very much in the weeds, quote unquote, of feeding the baby, of, there's not much. I mean, maybe at your stage with the bottle, and we're now doing introducing the bottle as well. And so I can help. But they're so connected to that baby. I just want to talk about our role. What do we see our role, or what is the example that we want to set as the, leader, the man of our household? How do you see that playing out with our wives being so in the weeds, quote unquote, hands-on with the baby so much? How can we be that steady ship in the harbor? Just want to kind of talk about that, open that up for a second before we close all this out.
That's a great question. So you have roles to play, right? And so I think it's important, it has been for us, to figure out, hey, what role are we playing? I cannot be the provider that Alex is. We have not used bottles in a long time because she has worked a ton to get her milk supply up to where she can sustain him, which is, just from going early days of like, I don't know if we're going to be able to breastfeed at all, to the other night, she pumped 8 ounces from one breast. And I'm like, remember the days where, like, we got a freezer full of milk, and like, this is an answered prayer. This is again, a frustration. And she's like, I don't have any room for my milk. And I'm like, do you hear yourself? Like, because I was there when you were crying about, like, often about, I'm not going to be able to feed my baby, to now I don't have room in our freezer because I have so much frozen milk. Like, what a gift, I can't be that. I can't be his mom, nor would I want to be. I'm not the nurturer. I am nurturing, but I'm not the nurturer. I'm not the one sitting under the tent at the beach that he's napping in the arms of, that, he will learn to become a human and be able to become a human because of the role that my wife plays, but he will learn to become a man because of the role that we play. And when you twist those roles, right, or you lose sight of what those roles are, it can become confusing for you. You can overstep your bounds. There can be some, this, that, and the other. I have to figure out really what her role is that I cannot fulfill, and then be the supporting actor to her main character. But in my own way, my main character is as the man who needs to show by example how to treat a woman, how to love his mom, how to love him. I'm the play parent, like I'm the one getting the toots out, I'm
Yeah,
the,
same.
what are the gross jobs? Like, let me change the diapers. Like at first it was like, oh, I have to change the diaper. That's our time. Like, find your time. It's the bath, it's the diapers early on. The mom's going to have a lot of time just inherently. Like, what's your time? I don't know if you found joy in the diaper changes. There's not a lot of joy to be had in the early diaper change, but like embracing the suck of like, dude, like this was a nice poop, man. Like
Come
this
on.
is like, you got to see this. This is like, dang, man. Or like figuring out. And now when you walk in a room, I don't know if Dan's to this point. Yeah, he probably is. He just sees you and like lights up. And it's like, man, how could anybody not want this? How could anybody be convinced that this is not the greatest thing that could possibly happen to you? How could anybody be convinced or told or have the feeling that this is not someone that I want to be part of their life? Like I just can't understand that. But then it's given me an incredible amount of grace knowing the privilege that he has of two parents that are there, that love him, that will always be there, that will, he's safe. And there are so many people, maybe even the majority of people now, that don't have that. And you start to have an amount of grace of like, oh, wow, like I had that. Not everybody has that. And you start to see somebody for maybe that person never had a father that told them that they love them. Maybe that person didn't have a mom that nurtured them like our moms do or our wives can for our sons, right? You can't do anything to right that wrong necessarily, except for to be able to provide your child with the privilege that you either had or you never had, right? And right that wrong, or be able to meet people where they are and understand that that is not where they're coming in at, and try to be able to provide what encouragement, what support you can to give them or their child a leg up that they never had. It's like, I can't imagine growing up any other way than I grew up, and giving my child a childhood anything less than what I was given. Right. It's just not, that's not the general consensus. And so how much better would the world be if we had mothers that nurtured and wanted their children? I can't imagine anybody not wanting a child. Like, there's so many people that want a child, and I'm not putting myself in anybody else's shoes, but especially with like the constant debate about abortion and about
Yep.
like, and again, it's very circumstantial. I'm not casting judgment. I cannot imagine having seen my child and becoming a father, looking at him and not wanting him. We're thinking about fathers that walk out on their children. But who knows what their example was?
Yep.
You're
Right.
But you can either continue that generational curse, or you can right the wrong by stepping up and being there in a way that he never was for you, And I just don't think there's a greater privilege in this world, aside from being a believer and disciple of Christ, than being a parent. There just isn't.
Such
Do
a
you
gift.
disagree? I
No,
mean,
dude. I mean, it's been such and it's you don't really experience it until you experience it. It's like being able to look at that child, and Dan's starting to smile and to give some of that feedback. And then, like this morning, yeah, he's sitting on my knees, he's getting his toots out, and then he smiles, and it's like there's nothing like it that I've ever experienced. And like you said, I think that's an important point. There might be people listening who didn't have that present father, present mother
Yep.
at all, and the easy route is to continue down, like you said, that path of like, well, screw it, I wasn't giving it, I'm not giving that to anybody, or that's just not even a possibility for me. Or you could be the one to step up and make a difference in your family tree, in your family line, and to be present, to serve your wife when it's not easy. I think that's what I have to constantly remind myself. Like, yeah, I'm not this, I wasn't created to nurture and provide as good as she can, but I can serve her and alleviate and help and ask how I can help, and for him be present. I just think it's so important. And I want to honor our fathers too, as we're talking about Father's Day. Is the plan is for this to come out on Father's Day, the example that they set.
Totally.
And, again, we're not perfect, but I just want to, shout out my father for just his presence and he was there.
Yep.
It wasn't always
Yep.
perfect, wasn't always
Mhm.
this or that, but he was there. He was present. He showed up,
Mhm.
and I want to be that for my son.
Yep.
I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm not going to have it all together, but I want to be there and to teach him that it's all right to fall down.
Mhm.
I'm here to help as you get back up, and just to be able. I think it's just so important, even just with both of us at this stage of life, to be able to be a support and accountability. And you're not alone. I want to
Yep.
tell, like, if there's any people are stepping into parenthood that like it can feel isolating, and but when you talk with other people who are going through it, it's just such a joy to be able to navigate. Oh my gosh, we're all experiencing this, and
Mhm.
again, we don't have it all together, but we can support each other and root
Yep.
each other on. And I just want to say that I'm rooting y'all on, man.
Yeah. Well, same to you guys. It's what a privilege to be able to do life with other people,
Yeah.
but then to step into seasons and create life with other people. You know what I mean? Like, it's been so fun to send out a FaceTime call telling someone that we were pregnant and then get a call back within weeks being like, "Hey, we actually knew we were pregnant when you called, but like we didn't want to spoil it for you." Like, we had so many friends, including you guys, that were due within just a matter of weeks or months of us, and it's just been so cool to root you guys along, even though we live hours away from each other. But I still remember commenting when you guys announced that you were pregnant. I was like, this kid is the like luckiest kid alive, most fortunate kid alive, because he's just blessed to have the best parent. You've never been parents, but some people just intrinsically have it. You guys have the intangibles. Like, there was no doubt in my mind that you guys are going to be great parents. And who knows? I think that there's a very real possibility that 30 years from now, that Dan's going to be sitting across from somebody and talking about you in the way that you just talked about Danny, which is really cool. And shout out to my dad too. He's amazing. Of course, my dad was only pulled in 3 directions. Your dad was pulled in 6. So step it up, Dad. I'm kidding. He's been great. He was there for everything, even when it didn't make sense. But I did want to. There was a book that I
Yeah.
read
Yeah.
weeks before Wick got here, and I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about. I think it's by John Eldridge. It's called "You Have What It Takes."
Mm.
It's a book. I mean, it's like the thinnest, smallest book ever. I
Oh,
read
you
it
get it?
like
Okay.
literally one sitting. It took me 20 minutes, and I'm not that fast of a reader. The synopsis of the book is it's all about dads and the role that you play in your children's life. And it splits it between dads of boys and dads of girls. And it makes the case that there's one thing that both a girl and a boy are looking to their dad for. For a girl, she needs to hear her dad remind her that she is lovely. And for a boy, he needs to know from his dad that he has what it takes. And that is your role. Nothing else trumps your role of a father of a girl, making sure that she knows that she is lovely. And there's nothing that trumps you as a boy dad telling your child, your boy, your son, you've got what it takes. And if you didn't have that, you are constantly craving that. And how many women do you know that are constantly craving someone to tell them that they're lovely? And they've never been told that. They've never been treated like that. And so they're going to fall into the arms of someone that's not going to treat them like they're lovely, because that's exactly who's looking for them and who they've learned to look for. And how many guys are going to live their lives not achieving what God has intended for them to achieve because they were never told that they have what it takes. And so if there's nothing else that, I learned throughout the entire process of preparing for WIT, it just really impressed upon me that if I do anything, I want him to walk away from every single conversation, every single interaction, every single day, knowing that if there's no one else on earth that he feels like believes that he has what it takes, that his dad does. And if we're blessed enough to have daughters one day, I hope we do, that there's no one that believes and reminds them more that they are lovely. And like, man, dude, talking about roles, like, whew, that's a big one.
It's so
if you can't do
powerful.
that, I'm not asking you to do everything. I'm not asking you to be perfect. Like, no one's asking you to be perfect. But if you can just make sure that everything flows out of that, is my action, is my presence, is my experience, is my time with Whit reinforcing that he has what it takes.
Like, I believe
I'm doing
in
my
you.
job.
I believe in
Yeah.
you.
You got what it takes. You fall down, it's okay. Pick up a new sport, like, hey, you got this. I'm not telling you you're going to be in the MLB, like maybe you will, but you got what it takes to go out there and play that position well. You've got what it takes to take your first steps. There have been so many things that like I'm like, oh, I wonder if he can do this. And we're reading a book together, and I'm like, can you turn the page? And like I'll grab his hand. This was weeks ago. I'll grab his hand and I'll like turn the page with him. I did it a couple of times, and then he reached out and turned the page. I was like, great. What am I not teaching him that he actually could do?
Yeah.
And if I'm not teaching him those things, is it because I don't believe that he has what it takes to do those things? Because like something in me just thought like, I wonder if he has what it takes to turn the page in this book. And he proved it to me.
Yeah.
Why? Because I showed him that he can do it. And then I encouraged him like, you got this, do it. And he turned it. Now every single night when we read books, he turns every page because he wants to show you that he has what it takes. Yeah. But how would he know if he has what it takes unless his dad didn't tell him and teach him that he has what it takes? How many pages aren't getting turned? It's like,
goodness, man. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like people will search for that their whole lives to prove that they have proving people wrong and they have what it takes.
Yep.
If they're not shown that, and man, as a girl, to know that you were seen, you were loved, you were beautiful, and just what a honor and what a responsibility we have, to be able to speak that into our children. And if we really step back, how God has spoken that into us, that as He speaks His word to allow us to step forward, and how often, like for us, to be able to speak that into our children for years to come. So dude, this is beautiful, man. This conversation has been incredible. To be able to, again, just want to affirm you where God has led you. I love all the the arrows in the quiver that we've talked about, from all the way from getting your pilot's license to now being back in the same place and in a more expanded role, from being friends that connected by a pool, knowing of each other's families, to now being able to witness each other, find someone that we love, see each other get married, have children only a couple months apart. I mean, I think Whit and Dan are what, 3 months? Was it January?
January 15th. So
so March 31st.
Yeah,
so month and a half? Or 2 months?
2.5 months.
2.5 months?
Yeah.
So maybe one day they'll be sitting across from each other talking about us old guys.
Well, they'll be together tonight. They'll be together tonight.
Come on, they'll get to meet each other tonight.
You guys jam out.
So Dan and Whit, if you're listening to this 30 years later, your dad and I called it. So we hope you all are great friends. And if not, we'll be in the same circles. So just want to thank you, man, for taking the time to talk, to have this conversation, and really just want to know that I'm praying for you as you continue to raise your child with your family. And I'm just very grateful for this friendship.
Yeah, same to you guys. There are many times in life when you think about people that you look up to. There are people that are ahead of you, people that are older than you. There are people that are more established than you. There are people that are further down the road. And in most of those categories, at least in age and in, age of their children, that kind of stuff, you guys are behind us, even if it's just by a little bit. But we look up to you. And so just know that you guys are your role models for more than just your child. Looking forward to watching Dan grow up, and he could not have been placed in a better family. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I always say, my family is the greatest family I've ever met. You guys give us an absolute run for my family's money. That you guys are amazing.
Thank you, brother.
We can't spend enough time with you guys. And that's why we try to prioritize every single beach trip. If nothing else, we need to see the Islanders at some point during this beach trip. And so really looking forward to spending some time with you guys tonight and getting the boys together. So
looking forward to it as well. Love you too. And wait, hey, one more thing before we close this out. And I forgot because I asked every guest this, and I think this has probably changed since we first talked. We'll end on this note. This podcast is called Carpe Momentum. Seize the moment. And this may have changed for you. But what does seizing the moment mean to you right now on this stage?
Yeah. So you asked me that in 2021.
Yeah, 21 or 20.
I
Yeah.
think it was in 2020 or 2021. And, there's a lot that has changed. I don't know that this has changed. Do you remember what I wrote? I do.
I
It's
can't.
okay. You've done a lot of this. I'm not expecting you to. It is enjoying the journey as much as the destination. And I don't know that I could think of something that's more accurate because, man, there's a lot of destinations. You could say you've arrived at multiple points. You're the role that you want. You're engaged. You're married. You're a father. And just you're all those things. Yeah, like you've been there. It doesn't mean that you've arrived. Like, yes, it's the destination. You made the destination. You're a father. It is incredibly fortunate, such a blessing. But it's times like this where you start to look back and realize, like, you didn't just become a father. Like, there are so many stones that had to be laid in order for you to become Dan's dad. Like, and if I had to do it over again, I don't think I'd change a single thing. And I guess looking forward, like how can you make decisions that 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, you look back and you're like, I'd do it all over again, because I became a dad. Yeah, I became a husband. Yeah, I became a fiance. Yeah, I became all these things, and I'm not discounting those things, but it was the journey that got to those things, that they didn't become this like pivotal mountaintop experience of like, oh, well, now the hike's over. I got to climb back down the mountain. It's like, no, this was just a mile marker on the trail, and you keep climbing and the view just keeps getting better and better. This isn't a hike where you hit a peak and you come back down, you hit a peak and you come back down. It's just, you just circle the mountain and you just keep climbing. And there are times where the path might take you a little bit further down in order to take you higher up. There's times where you got to sidestep and cross over some water and that kind of stuff. But like, how can you enjoy the hike as much as you enjoy the final destination? And so I think seizing the moment to me still means enjoying that journey as much as the destination. Right now, the destination, as a dad, that will always be the destination, but it's not the only destination, because hopefully one day we get to turn into people like your dad and my dad, and we're granddads, like that's crazy. Life has not peaked yet. It just keeps getting better. So, so does the journey.
That's beautiful, man. I think it's a beautiful way to cap it off. And just with the journey that, like you said, it doesn't stop here. This is, we're continuing the journey together with our wives, our families, as friends, as community, and just so excited for what's to come.
Yeah,
so.
Same here. Who knows what happens after this? Like, if you would have told us that any of this stuff would have happened when we sat down together in 2018, we wouldn't have believed you. Yeah.
Dude, we need to have another touch point 8 years later and see where we're at.
It's crazy. How much do we not know that, but then again, how much are we in control of?
Dude,
very little of it.
Crazy. So, well, dude, thank you again. Thank you for taking the time. Dude, love you, brother.
Love you, bro.